Greetings. I'm writing this because something's been eating at me for far too long. It all happened back in the summer of 2012, right before I turned 17. Back then, I wasn't the homebody I am now. I craved adventure, the kind you only find in bad horror movies, or so I thought. It started with a sleepover invitation from Mark, the resident daredevil of our small town. He lived out in the boonies, miles from any traffic lights, with his family in a sprawling farmhouse that seemed to have sprung straight from a Gothic novel. Peeling paint, warped floorboards that groaned like restless souls, and flickering shadows that danced a macabre ballet in the dying light. The place practically oozed atmosphere. We were teenagers, invincible in our own minds. The spooky setting only added to the thrill. We planned a night of pizza-fueled mayhem, video games pushing the limits of our teenage reflexes, and ghost stories whispered under the covers, punctuated by nervous giggles. Classic sleepover stuff, right? Except this farmhouse held a darkness none of us anticipated. As the night wore on, the wind picked up outside, howling like a banshee clawing at the windows. Every groan of the house seemed amplified, taking on a sinister edge. We tried to laugh it off, but a cold sweat prickled my skin. Then, at precisely 2 a.m., the power flickered and died, plunging us into an inky blackness that felt heavy and suffocating. Panic clawed at my throat. We fumbled for our phones, the measly flashlight beams casting distorted shadows that danced on the walls. The silence that followed the power outage was worse, a thick, oppressive quiet that seemed to press in on us from all sides. Then it started. A faint tapping sound from directly above us in the attic. It was barely a whisper at first, like a single fingernail tapping a frantic rhythm against the wood. But with each passing second, the tapping grew louder, faster, more insistent. My breath hitched in my throat. A cold dread settled in my stomach, heavy and unwelcome. I stole a glance at Mark, usually the life of the party. He was ashen, his eyes wide with terror. We exchanged a silent look, a shared fear reflected in each other's pale faces. The tapping continued, a relentless counterpoint to the pounding of our hearts. The rhythmic tapping hammered a frantic beat against the silence, turning the old house into a giant, hollow drum. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan from the ancient wood seemed to answer the call, building a symphony of unease. Panic gnawed at the edges of my sanity. We huddled closer together on the threadbare rug, a desperate huddle for warmth and courage against the encroaching fear. Time stretched, measured only by the relentless tapping and the frantic hammering of our hearts. Then a new sound joined the macabre orchestra, a slow, deliberate creak from the floorboards directly above us. It was a sound loaded with purpose, a weighty groan that sent shivers crawling down my spine. We held our breaths, straining to hear what might come next. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sounds that came before. It was a pregnant pause, heavy with anticipation, as if something unseen held its breath, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Just when I thought the tension might snap, the tapping stopped abruptly. The sudden absence of sound was like a physical blow, leaving a ringing emptiness in its wake. We didn't dare move, frozen in a tableau of terror. A single cold gust of wind ripped through the cracked window panes, sending shivers down my spine. Loose glass rattled in its frame, creating a discordant melody that added to the unnerving silence. In the momentary flash of moonlight that pierced the darkness, I swear I saw something. A figure, silhouetted against the boarded-up attic window. Tall and skeletal, with arms outstretched as if reaching for something, it seemed to hang suspended in the air for a single terrifying heartbeat. My scream ripped through the silence, a primal sound born of raw terror. It triggered a chain reaction, and the room erupted in a cacophony of shouts and panicked scrambling. Adrenaline surged through my veins, erasing all caution. We didn't bother gathering our things. The only thing that mattered was getting out of that house, away from the unseen entity lurking in the darkness above. We bolted for the door, tripping over each other in our haste, the floorboards groaning ominously under our weight. We didn't stop running until we were far, far away from the farmhouse, gasping for breath under the pale light of dawn. The chilling image of that skeletal figure burned into my retinas, a horrifying souvenir of a night gone terribly wrong. We never spoke of that night again, at least not directly. The unspoken pact of silence hung heavy between us, a shared secret that bound us together in a way we never intended. Mark's family moved away a few months later, claiming the house was too drafty and needed extensive repairs. We all breathed a silent sigh of relief, glad to be rid of the place. Years passed, the memory of that night fading with time, replaced by the humdrum of everyday life. I built a career, got married, and started a family of my own. The farmhouse became a distant memory, a shadowy figure lurking at the edges of my past. But you want to know the scariest part? One evening, while flipping through the channels, I saw a news report that sent a bolt of ice through my heart. The report claimed that the previous owner, a reclusive old man, had been murdered and hidden in the attic for months. A shiver ran down my spine, and I leaned closer to the screen, a morbid fascination pulling me in. And then they showed a picture of the attic window. It was completely bricked shut. My breath caught in my throat. The image of the skeletal figure, arms outstretched, morphed and solidified in my mind. It wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a ghost. It was the victim himself, trapped and forgotten. The news report continued, detailing the ongoing investigation and the search for the killer. But the horrifying truth had already settled in my gut. The farmhouse wasn't haunted. It was a tomb.